situation like there now.
Pia, despite the improbability that Tropical Depression Gordo and Super Typhoon Hinamnor will make landfall, their impact may still be felt in some parts of the country.
At the northeasternmost part of Luzon is the municipality of Santa Ana in Cagayan. Some fisherfolk here already stopped their activities in preparation for the impact of Tropical Depression Gordo and Super Typhoon Hinamnor.
Yung lang po hangin ng kung malakas, di wag na lang kaming pumaraot, gano'n din. Nakikaramdam lang po kami.
The Santa Ana Cagayan Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council is now making a series of important announcements.
Together with the PNP, sir, nagkakanda kami ng upland tambuli na may parating na bagyo. Mag-announce kami sa para barangay, mga low-lying areas na winawarningan namin sila na maghanda kasi nga may parating na bagyo.
In Tuguegarao City, local officials and residents are preparing for a possible disaster just 1 week after Typhoon Florita stormed the
Officials
region.
and residents.
Barangay Caritan Norte is among the flood-prone areas in the city where most families residing near rivers and creeks are usually affected. Some residents have already transferred their valued possessions to higher portions of their houses in anticipation of flooding.
Siyempre takot po sa kasi yung tubig po nasa na po namin hagdan, kaya naglikas po kami diyan, sir, nung para sa safety, baka biglaang tumaas pa.
Officials are now ready to distribute medicines and first aid kits along with relief goods.
Nagrurubing kami, nagra-around kami kung sino talaga yung affected families.
Meanwhile, the Magat Dam water elevation is at 187.3 meters as of 2 p.m., just a few meters before reaching its spilling level at 190 meters.
Wala pa naman tayong reason para magbukas pa ng gate natin. Kung makikita natin na kung nasa almost 188 na tayo at makikita natin na malakas yung rainfall, ay magkukan na tayo, mag-preemptive release na tayo. Hindi na natin hihintayin yung 190.
The Cagayan River is likely to swell once the gate of Magat Dam opens. The Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council of Region 2 is preparing for 2 typhoons that could possibly bring rains and extreme flooding in Cagayan Valley.
The weather situation here in Cagayan Valley is relatively fine, but local officials and residents who are used to these scenarios have prepared for any eventuality. And that's the latest here in Cagayan. Back to you, Pia.
Stanley Gahete there reporting. Well, back here in the National Capital Region, the Metro Manila Development Authority says its traffic enforcers will ramp up efforts against erring drivers on the ground as it abides by a Supreme Court temporary stoppage of the No Contact Apprehension Policy, or NCAP. The MMDA says it will continue on-the-ground apprehension and assign enforcers to areas with security cameras. These areas include EDSA, Commonwealth, Quezon Avenue, Rojas Boulevard, C5, and Macapagal Boulevard. The MMDA explains the NCAP suspension began Tuesday afternoon when it received the court notice. Court order has no retroactive effect, which means fines and apprehensions that took place before the state order are valid.
Sana po ma-maintain natin yung driver discipline even in the light of the suspension of the no contact apprehension policy dahil para naman po sa ating lahat ito, para po mapabilis ang daloy ng trapiko, para po safe ang ating mga motorista.
Since the MMDA is not a respondent in the case, the agency says it will consult the Office of the Solicitor General for advice whether or not to join in the petition. The MMDA registered around 107,000 apprehensions from January until August 24th under the now suspended traffic policy. Common violations were disregarding traffic signs, the number coding scheme, and loading and unloading of passengers. City, the mayor there issuing an executive order allowing the voluntary use of face masks in most places except medical facilities. Mayor Michael Rama says establishments and schools can still require the wearing of masks, adding that this is, quote, non-obligatory, but a measure of self-preservation. Rama adds they informed the Interior Department of the new policy. But Health Officer in charge Maria Rosario Vergeres says the Health Department was not consulted about the move.
Hindi po pwede na may isang lugar sa ating bansa na nagpapatupad ng kanilang protocol, samantalang the rest of the country are implementing the other side of the protocols or magkaiba. We know that people all over the country travels to and fro these different areas of the country. And we know that COVID-19 crosses borders. So if we are preventing the infections in most of the areas in the country, and one area in the country will not have that kind of safeguard, and therefore the possibility or the risk of infections would be higher in this area because the safeguards are not there.
Neighboring Mandaue City also plans to ease face masks rules, especially in open spaces. Mayor Jonas Cortez's Executive Secretary Edu Ibanez says Cortez will recommend amending the local ordinance on face masks to the Mandaue City Council. Last June, Cebu Province lifted the face mask mandate in well-ventilated and open spaces. The Health Department again urging the public to get boosted. The DOH partnered with the private sector for its Pinas Lakas booster campaign to make vaccination more accessible. Aside from booster shots, people can also get their primary vaccines at Robinson's Magnolia in Quezon City. The DOH says the booster rate in Metro Manila and other regions has yet to reach 50%.
Sa ngayon po ay nasa 40, almost 48% na yung ating booster na babakunahan doon sa target po natin na doon sa 658,000 plus.
The department admits it is challenging to urge people to get their boosters because many are becoming complacent. Non-residents of Quezon City are welcome to get vaccinated. People can register through the QC Vax Easy website, but walk-ins are allowed. More stories ahead. The new economics report lists the Philippines as the fourth most disaster-prone country in the world for torrential storms and flooding. And former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev dies at the age of 91.
It can be dangerous out there. Buti na lang there's locally superfoods. Para sa akin, super nutritious, super delicious. All superfoods contain more antioxidants than your average fruit. Superfood for super you.
Let the get down, never touch ground, never enough. Get me feeling good. Vibes. Everything's good. Always good vibes.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Back to our top story, Pag-asa keeping track of two cyclones. Tropical depression Gardo maintaining its strength but is set to weaken into a low pressure area tonight or early tomorrow as it begins to merge with super typhoon Hinamno. Weather Bureau Pag-asa forecasts cloudy skies with scattered rain showers and thunderstorms here in Metro Manila, the Calabarzon region, Mimaropa, Bicol region, Ilocos, the Cordilleras, Batanes, Zambales, and Bataan. Hinamno has yet to obtain a local name, Henry, anytime from 6 to 8 p.m. Pag-asa said signal number 3 may be raised over extreme northern Luzon within this period. People in affected areas may see strong winds and waves. A new study shows floods and other water-related disasters could cost the Philippines over 6.96 trillion pesos or $124 billion in losses in less than 30 years. Global professional services company GHD released its Economics report, which ranked the Philippines as the 4th most affected country in terms of water-related calamities. The report says the agriculture sector stands to lose the most. The study recommended carrying out flood studies and building infrastructure out of flood zones, but it acknowledged the challenge of doing so in densely populated areas. The Agriculture Department sounds the alarm over the low supply of salt in some vegetables. As Lois Calderon tells us, the shortfall in produce highlights the country's dependence on imports.
Onions, garlic, salt. They're your key spices when you saute, and even when you make your salad. But the government says they've become scarce. Estimates by the Department of Agriculture and its attached agencies, the Bureaus of Fisheries and Plant Industry are all in the red, a deficit. From onion farmers in Central Luzon to Calabarzon, Mimaropa, down to the Visayas, white onion harvest has been zero.
We have no importation of yellow onion since January. The rest is local stocks. While the harvest that was harvested from April, March was computed to last only on 3 to 4 months. So that's why the supply of yellow onion is zero or scarce.
Even Ilocos, the garlic country, is not producing enough of this major spice.
We are not sufficient at all pagdating po sa garlic, sir. No, we are dependent on importation.
Agencies that work with coastal villages are moving to find ways to help salt producers plug the scarcity. Salt makers is one industry that has yet to build a roadmap.
As far as local production is concerned, admittedly, we have not produced enough.
Some fast food chains have already substituted other vegetables for white onions.
We have already spoken with fast food chains who are big onion users, and we will start contract growing, of course, protecting the farmers to make sure that their prices will not be sacrificed.
Lawmakers also want to get to the bottom of the chicken and egg story. Data show there are enough, but egg prices have doubled in recent weeks to as much as 10 pesos in supermarkets. Kamote is back too after at least one kamote chips maker recently flagged supply shortage. There's enough rice, fish, and pork too, but the stock is buffered by imports. A sad reminder of the Philippines' dependence on food importation and of the decades-old neglect of its agriculture sector. Lawmakers have no prosecution powers, but they have the power of the purse, dictating how much money will go to food and agriculture. Lois Calderon, CNN Philippines.
A network of digital advocates is asking the National Privacy Commission to investigate alarming spam texts that now have the names of recipients. Digital Pinoys are worried how unknown senders have gotten hold of receivers' identities in what seem like personalized spam texts. The message is inviting the recipients to click a link which will be redirected to an online gambling site. The group adds the NPC should immediately investigate and seek prosecution if there are cohorts based locally and whether local companies collecting personal information are selling data to third parties. For its part, the NPC ordered the country's 3 mobile network providers to blast warnings against these new forms of spam messages. In a statement, Globe Telecom said it is bent on putting a stop to these activities, and it has already blocked nearly 800 million scam and spam messages from January to the end of July. The Tourism Department and its attached agencies are seeking a budget of nearly 3.6 billion pesos for next year. That's higher than the budget allocated for the DOT this year, which is 2.74 billion. The DOT plans to launch more tourism initiatives, such as building one-stop shops for travelers. These areas will have clean restrooms as well as personnel who could help tourists manage their accommodations, travel information, and security.
We are breaking ground on 10 tourist-serviced rest areas, 2 in Luzon, 4 in Visayas, and 2 in Mindanao. If you're a tourist traveling across the country from one destination to the next, one of the most basic necessities is a clean restroom. And yet, it is barely available. And that is why we see this as a very important project that will enhance the overall tourist experience.
The DOT also plans to launch the Bisita Be My Guest program, or BBM Guest, where Filipinos living overseas can win prizes by bringing tourists to the country.
Through the BBM Guest program, we will be offering raffle prizes to those that bring guests into the Philippines. We will be providing them with a travel passport that they can use to go across key destinations, get stamps, and claim a prize at the airport. And this will also give them a privilege card that would provide them with discounts in accredited establishments across the country.
And the DOT will roll out an app connecting tourists to accommodation sites, accredited tour operators, and transportation providers. Frasco says the Life Cycle app will also help the DOT determine how long tourists stay in an area and how much they spend. The Philippine National Oil Company appealing to Congress for a revolving fund so it can provide fuel discounts in case of volatile prices. PNOC President and CEO Jesus Posada says the state-owned company has a one-time budget of 2.5 billion pesos for targeted fuel relief subsidy. PNOC wants the allocation expanded through a special provision in the 2023 budget. Posada says PNOC will not duplicate what other government agencies are doing in providing aid to sectors affected by the fuel price hikes.
The difference, Mr. Senator, is that we are doing it in terms of discounted fuel rather than in terms of money. So we intend this not to be a dole-out, but to be a sustainable fund. We will be designating specific service stations, good Senator. In fact, there will be 2 modes of doing this. Either government will do the importation itself and get a third party to distribute, or we will co-load and co-purchase with a given oil company.
But Committee on Energy Vice Chairman Win Gatchalian says more discussions are needed as he raised concerns of possible corruption. The Migrant Workers Department has listed 5 emerging markets for Filipino job seekers. Portugal needs workers in its tourism sector, while Austria and Croatia require healthcare and IT professionals. Meanwhile, Hungary is looking for skilled workers and Romania domestic workers. Secretary Toots Ople also says these countries have reached out to the government, although she advises those interested to wait until negotiations are completed.
Pag-uusapan pa namin kung ano yung mga occupations na pwede, magkano ang sahod, anong lalamanin ng kontrata. So wag muna po kayong pumunta doon, lalo na bilang mga turista, dahil baka mapahamak lang po kayo. Hintayin nyo lang po at nakaschedule naman na yung mga bilateral talks namin.
Meanwhile, the department has asked Facebook to take down a number of pages found illegally recruiting Filipinos for overseas jobs. In global headlines, China closes the world's largest electronics market as the city of Shenzhen imposes more COVID-19 lockdowns. The tech district of Huaihiyang Bay is one of the 3 neighborhoods placed under tighter COVID restrictions. All businesses except for supermarkets, pharmacies, and hospitals are shut down until Thursday. Residents are forbidden to leave their homes except to get tested for COVID. Shenzhen officials say the spike in infections is because of new Omicron subvariant BF.15, seen as more transmissible and harder to detect. In Russia, the last leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, has died. He was 91. Russian news sources say his death was because of a long illness. Gorbachev led the Soviet Union from 1985 until its collapse in 1991. He is credited for introducing key political and economic reforms to the USSR and helping end the Cold War. Up next on Newsnights, the San Miguel Beermen and TNT Tropang Giga clash in a pivotal Game 5 of the Philippine Cup Finals. And game developer Free Fire officially releases Justin Bieber's newest track, Beautiful Love. You're watching CNN Philippines.
Programming to bring you this in
Welcome back. Breaking news for Super Typhoon Hinamno has entered the Philippine area of responsibility, and it's now called Henry. Pagasa says it entered at 5:30 this afternoon. We are closely monitoring developments, so give you more information as soon as they become available. Making headlines now in sports, former PBA Commissioner Noli Ayala takes on a new role as chairman of the Philippine Sports Commission. Malacanang confirming Ayala's appointment last night. The veteran sportscaster joins bowling legend and Commissioner Olivia Bongku in the commission. Sharing his excitement about the appointment, Ayala writes, in his words, "Time to serve. Let's get to work." And which team will triumph in the pivotal Game 5 of the PBA Philippine Cup Finals? The TNT Tropang Giga and the San Miguel Beermen are now competing at the Big Dome, with TNT in the lead 41-37 in the second quarter. The squad takes this match will be a win away from the championship. Stay tuned to our social media platforms for the results. In entertainment, get ready to bring your childhood dreams and have a Kame good time. Did I say that right? The cinemas as Dragon Ball superhero movie hits Philippine theaters. The famous Japanese media franchise is back and all eyes are on its Piccolo Gohan tag team. The movie has become the 5th highest grossing anime film of all time since its release on August 19th. Jokoy's Easter Sunday is finally in theaters. After its debut in Hollywood earlier this month, Easter Sunday follows Jokoy as Joe Valencia, a struggling actor, comedian, and single father who reunites with his dysfunctional Philam family on Easter Sunday. And from movies to music, Justin Bieber's newest single, Beautiful Love, is now available worldwide. Game developer Garena Free Fire has officially released the track, which features Justin's animated character, J Biebs. Here's a sneak peek of the new dance anthem. Garena Free Fire. That is it for tonight. Join me again on news.ph at 7 p.m. and on Politics as usual at 8. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
This program is brought to you by
RPN, Radio Philippines Network Incorporated, DXKO. Presence sa Simbay Utso sa bayan sa inyong radyo. RPN DXKO, ang radyo ronda dili sa Dakbayan sa Cagayan de Oro. Siglahan na may dalaon sa katawan, andang na serbisyo sa tanan. Ang RPN DXKO radyo ronda sakop sa KBP, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
There's a popular saying that goes, confidence is the most powerful thing that you can wear. When you feel good about your abilities, trust your own judgment, and accept who you are, you can be your happiest and healthiest self. But self-confidence is something we all can use a little help with. On the program today, we'll talk more about the impact it can have in our lives and practical as well as effective tips in order to boost someone's self-confidence. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to Talk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Our guests are here today to give us some practical tips. With us is Luis Angelo Villaruel. He's a psychologist at Kitsugi Sai and Dementia Society of the Philippines. Also with us is Matt Doming, who is a psychologist and life coach from M-Psych Services. Self-confidence can significantly improve someone's life, but it's not to be confused with that of arrogance. I'll start the discussion with Luis. Could you tell us what exactly is the definition of being self-confident?
Self-confidence is the belief in oneself or the ability to engage adequately with challenges. Appropriate self-confidence requires a realistic sense of feeling secure in one's capabilities. We all need some help in developing this because actually self-confidence is not something we're born with innately. It's something that we develop for ourselves, and it's something that's highly connected with self-esteem, which is the valuation of our own worth.
Now, Luis, let's talk about what goes on in the body of someone physiologically, the brain chemicals involved whenever someone has that good self-confidence. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Self-confidence is related mostly to two neurotransmitters, namely dopamine and serotonin. So, as we know, serotonin is the happy hormone, and studies show that high serotonin activity is positively correlated with less anxiety and more confidence. So it's more about how serotonin actually boosts and gives us a greater feeling of confidence. For dopamine, this is more to feel more pleasure.
Coach Matt, when it comes to self-confidence, how exactly can having self-confidence improve someone?
It involves about being true to yourself, being honest with what you feel, how your attitude in life. No, it has something to do with knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So in that case, you know where you are good at and where you are not good at. So kumbaga, it's both knowing your talents and skills and at the same time your personal limitation.
It may be often overlap self-confidence and self-esteem. Pareho lang ba itong dalawa or is there a difference between self-esteem and self-confidence?
They are really very much interrelated. And I really think that self-confidence is the effect of how we value ourselves, which is in that case called self-esteem. Self-confidence is believe sa sarili. Like you're confident that you can do this thing or cannot do this thing. But self-esteem has something to do with how much you value yourself. Do you see yourself in a high value or low value? And it has something to do with different experiences that we had in our life. So the better self-esteem, the higher your self-esteem, mataas ang pagpapahalaga sa sarili, then it follows that your self-confidence is also high.
What about the lack thereof? How does this negatively impact not just relationship, society, but also the mental well-being of someone?
Those kasi that have low self-confidence typically believe they can't do things. They believe that they're always going to make mistakes and they define themselves by those mistakes and their flaws. They believe that they have little or no control over the situation. And this causes them to have all sorts of problems. The thing is, this low self-confidence could be coming from insecurities that they might have that they are not able to deal with on their own. And it could cause a myriad of problems physically and psychologically. So for example, the first problem that they could be experiencing is oversleeping. Because tayo naman, pagka na-overwhelmed tayo, di ba? Minsan natutulog na lang tayo para we get to rest and rejuvenate. However, worst case scenario for someone with low confidence is baka mag-spiral sila in a way na, sige, matutulog muna ako. Then pagising, they still believe that they can't handle the task, pero may madadagdag na task ulit. And then matutulog and repeat and it gets harder and harder for them to break that cycle.
Is it possible that someone has gone through most of their life with having low self-confidence pero hindi nila actually nare-realize ito?
There is one thing that we are really bad at, no? For most of us, and that is knowing ourselves. And sometimes we are not even familiar about the things that we need to improve in ourselves, which includes having low self-confidence. And when we talk about having low self-confidence, it has something to do with our experiences in life, especially when we were kids, when we were growing up. Maybe we had experiences with people criticizing us more than praising us, or maybe for some people hindi talaga na-experience yung ma-praise yung lagi na lang silang napupuna. And at some point they live through life, nakasanayan nila na I'm shy, I don't really interact with people that well, I don't believe in myself. And for some of them, they think that that's normal. And we know for sure that we are alive, we can still develop ourselves. And we need to develop ourselves. That's why we have, therapy, we have life coaching and all those things to improve ourselves. But of course, for some people, they are not aware that these things really needs improvement.
Now, a lack of self-confidence brings about negativity as well as doubt, and this can impact our physical health. More on this when we return. We're your partner in healthcare. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines, where caring is our calling. Now, today we're talking about practical and effective ways to improve our self-confidence and why it's very important to do so. Now, many people do struggle with low self-confidence. Luis, when do we know that low self-confidence is a cause for concern? And what are some of the mental illnesses that may arise?
It can go unnoticed to that person kasi. because they've kind of built a life now, especially when you've reached adulthood na, you've kind of developed all these coping mechanisms, all of these strategies to try to continue to live your life without necessarily dealing with those insecurities. So sometimes in relationships, it could come out, no? It could become a dependent nature because those with low self-confidence don't really value yung sa sarili nila, no? Low self-confidence and low self-esteem. They don't value their own worth. They don't value themselves. So they have to look for someone to attach to, and that could cause them to be dependent to that partner. No? Sometimes this also leads into the lack of self-care, no? Not establishing boundaries for oneself. Yung parating nag-yes lang ng yes dahil kasi natatakot sila na if they reject a friend or if they say no to someone, baka hindi na sila aayain ulit and they'll be left alone, which is what they don't want to be, no? Because they cannot, they have this difficulty of being alone.
In our everyday life, we come across challenges and obstacles. And even if we take them on confidently, we may fail at those things. Now, failure is a part of life, but it can affect our mental state. Coach Matt, when it comes to dealing with failure, dealing with situations, how could we manage situations like this and still remain confident?
If we remain realistic, mistakes and failures are part of success. And most likely, having true self-confidence, no? Ang sabi natin kanina, it's not just about knowing about your strengths. It's also knowing about your personal limitations. That human as we are not perfect. We are really bound to commit mistakes. And in order for us to really develop self-confidence, true self-confidence, we need to acknowledge those personal limitations. And ang pinakauna dyan is tanggapin natin na tao lang tayo, nagkakamali.
What's your advice for people who are really having a hard time accepting failure? Not just failure, but rejection, for that matter, Coach Matt.
It would be very extremely difficult for some, especially kapag merong mga social anxiety, no? Especially kapag merong mga mental disorders, that would really be very hard. And it's not just as easy as telling them, just tanggapin mo na yan at bumangon ka na, no? Just move on. And it's really hard. Sometimes it would be helpful to grieve on the process. Like, for example, you fail in a board exam. It's not easy, especially if your family is expecting too much of you. Sometimes you need to grieve, you need to cry over it. No, if you have a friend, if may mga kaibigan kang handang makinig sa'yo, tell them about how hurtful that experience was, no? And because grieving about the negative experiences in our life, especially those that really pull down our self-confidence, will really help because it would be, it would release the negative emotions connected to those situations. And if negative emotions is not there, it would be easier for us to be rational.
Luis, what can you say about that advice? We have to identify our emotions and be rational. But what about those whenever they feel that trigger? Sort of, kumbaga, shut down ang pinag-uusapan doon where all form of reason is lost. What kind of tips can you give the loved ones of people like that or even that person themselves?
So whether that be family, that be friends, a significant other, basta social support niya, what they can mostly that they can only do at some points kasi is to continuously offer their support. Most of the time kasi nire-reject na ng tao outright. Siguro for the first few times, yung offering of the support, pero that constant presence kasi can be reassuring to the individual who's going through all of these things, no? Now, for the person themselves, when they start to feel like they're spiraling na out of control, ang suggestion talaga dyan is to try to do some grounding exercises. Now, grounding yourself in reality, grounding yourself in your senses, grounding yourself in realistic things. Kasi yun yung thing, pagka nagiging anxious ka na because you have low self-confidence or because you're spiraling out of control, you need something to anchor you down. So one thing that you can do is just write down whatever it is that you're thinking of, what you're feeling, and how you're acting at that moment. Another technique that they could do other than journaling, if they really feel like they're out of control, we can actually call it yung mammalian dive reflex. So kahit just splashing water on your face and really with cold water to slow down your heart rate, to slow down your thoughts, to slow down everything about you muna so you can get to that more relaxed position. And then you can count things with your five senses. So, for example, five things that you can see around the room. What are their properties that you can see? Things that you can smell, things that you can hear, things that you can touch, and maybe even taste. Once you try to activate these five senses, kasi it helps you ground yourself into real things, no? Not just whatever's running wild in your head.
What are the effective ways to boost your self-confidence? More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on Mental Health Talk. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk here on CNN Philippines. You can do so much with the proper self-confidence, but building it takes practice. For one, it's hard to feel good about yourself if you're abusing your body. Coach Matt, what are some self-care tips to improve our self-confidence?
Eat healthy, sleep well, take care of your body, because sometimes promoting those things that can improve our self-confidence, such as good health, good appearance, then most likely it can also be a additional factor to boost your self-confidence. There are also things that you can do mentally. And number one is to help yourself accept those things that you don't really like in you. Maybe physically, there are a lot of social standards about beauty na sometimes hindi pasok yung ating katawan. Sometimes we are insecure about our skin, insecure about our face and all. But nonetheless, it's really important to accept what we have. Kasi again, confidence is accepting your strengths, what's good in you, and those things that you think are not socially acceptable in you.
Well, how can someone realize from low self-confidence, naging overconfident naman nila? What are some of the detriments to this?
There is a thin line between true confidence and overconfidence. Now, pag ang pinaka number one indicator dyan, someone na apparently is confident pero just overconfident is kapag hindi nila alam yung mga personal limitations nila. So kumbaga, parang sa sobrang taas ng pag-value nila sa sarili, hindi na nakikita na yung ibang tao may halaga din. Kaya natatapakan yung ibang tao. Like say for example, sa conversation, because you think that you are more superior, then you have all the strengths and all the other people are inferior to you, then masosolo mo yung conversation. So kumbaga, that would end up detrimental to you as well kasi hindi magkakaroon ng proper communication, lalayo ang mga tao sa'yo. Or for example, sa trabaho, like sinosolo mo lahat ng spotlight na hindi mo na nabibigyan ng proper opportunities yung colleagues mo, or sometimes natatapakan mo na rin yung boss mo, then most likely that would create conflict and that would create some bad effects in your career.
Luis, when it comes to trying to boost someone's self-confidence, one of the things that is done quite frequently, people are aware it or not, is that they compare themselves with others. Yun yung nagiging basis nila. What can you say about this, Luis? People comparing themselves with others.
It actually stems from a sense of inferiority. So those with overconfidence kasi, they try to overcompensate naman that inferiority by trying to create a mask in order to control the environment around them, because they feel like their own insecurity or their own inferiority is so hard to overcome, they would rather change the world around them than rather change themselves kasi. No? So, it comes from a sense of superiority rather than success. We have what we call striving for success and striving for superiority. And those with overconfidence, that's why they have this tendency to compare themselves to others, because they cannot compare it to themselves, to their previous selves, because they don't really see themselves as a worthy standard to base themselves on. No? So, actually, in that sense kasi, both low self-confidence and overconfidence stem from the exact same thing, from that inferiority. And those with overconfidence kasi feel the need that they have to prove themselves kasi to themselves and to everyone else.
Malaking factor ba that someone surround themselves with positive people?
If we surround ourselves with people na supportive, at the same time nakikita yung tunay nating halaga, like you go into a working environment that your talent is being appreciated, like your family is seeing your potential, then that would really be a great factor na magbuboost ng self-confidence mo. Pero of course, kailangan din maging realistic sometimes. No? So supporting the person's talent and abilities only if deserved naman talaga niya. No? Kasi kapag sinosobrahan din natin ang pagpipraise na hindi natin pinapakita yung personal limitations ng tao, doon papasok yung tinatawag nating overconfidence na pinag-uusapan natin. No? Kaya ang advice ko sa iba, no? This is my advice to some of my clients during therapy, na why not try to change your environment? Just try to change, and maybe let's see if there is an effect. Kasi sometimes getting out from that environment na nag-pull down ng self-confidence mo in the first place might really help, because the environment again is a significant factor.
Thank you very much, psychologist Luis Villaruel and life coach Matt Doming, for being with us today. We appreciate your time and your insights very much. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and we'll see you again next time.